Spacebird Media.
Why do so many people find solace in the crackle of a vinyl record? Let's dive in. This isn't just another vinyl podcast. It's a journey into the heart of recovery through the universal language of music. Each week we share powerful stories of overcoming addiction and life's toughest challenges. Together, we'll uncover how the warmth of vinyl can guide us through moments of vulnerability and strength. So, drop the needle, lean in, and let the music heal. Let's get started.
This is Records in Recovery.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Records and Recovery, our chance, of course, to always talk about music, the bands we love, the songs we love, and the ones that have helped us to heal along the way. And I love when I get a chance not only to share my stories, but then to hear yours as well. And when I cross paths with people who have become some of my favorites in the world, not just in radio, but in the world, this week is definitely a labor of love as I get to welcome my good friend Windle Jay. Bud, how are you?
I'm doing great. You know, flattery will get you anywhere.
Well, I appreciate
the good flattery. Well, I love you. You have been around since one of our very, very dear friends that both of us knew, the Birdman, who I listened to on radio as a kid. And you and I have known each other since our Birdman days, and I miss him every day. Unfortunately, if you don't know of Bill Thomas, he passed away. But you and I have been linked through a mutual music lover, and DJ for years and years, and I have watched you just soar to great heights.
Well, and of course, as you and I run into each other at vinyl shows all the time, like it's always like, what are you looking for? What did you get? You know, all the treasures.
Yep.
Right. Your budget's a little higher than mine. I'm kind of a cheapskate, but I've always wanted to ask you, what was that first record that you bought with your own money? Like Little Windle Jay, what did you buy?
Well, I'm kind of embarrassed about the first record that I ever bought.
Oh, I got to know this one.
Because I was very, very, very young at the time. I got, let me preface that by saying, my father, little history here. My father was 14 years older than my mother. I am 62. And when I was growing up, we did not have a TV in the house until I was about 17, 18 years old.
All right.
And we listened to the radio, and we listened to my mother's open top, almost like a piece of furniture, RCA record player and radio. And I was exposed to all kinds of things. My father liked big band music, Glenn Miller, swing, and classic country, or what we consider classic country today. My mother was a Beatles fan.
Yeah.
The first album that I ever got, my mother gave it to me for Christmas the year that I also got a little portable record player from her, and it was Abbey Road. And I still have it till this day, and I think that's probably my favorite album of all time.
Yeah.
It's the album that I go to when I'm down and I don't, I might be having something going on that's got me a little upset, or things might not be going the right way. That's a safe haven for me. I'll put that on and listen to it. Unfortunately, the first record I ever actually bought for myself when I was a young kid was The Candyman by Sammy Davis Jr.
Nice.
Candyman,
man.
But my father was a Sammy Davis Jr. fan.
Yeah.
And the song was on the radio, and I thought, well, it'd be great. My dad will love this. And so I got it, and I still have all my dad's old Sammy Davis Jr. stuff. I still listen to it to this day. But the first real album that ever struck a chord with me was most definitely Abbey Road.
Yeah, of course, as our connection with the Beatles, goes deep. And I always tell people when they start, because they're like, well, I've never really gotten into the music. Where should I start? Do I start with the Mop Tops or, Sgt. Pepper? I'm like, actually start with Rubber Soul, because that is that transition of them coming out of Mop Tops into truly just a very transparent band.
And it's interesting because my youngest son started collecting music, and he grew up listening to stuff in the 90s. You know, he was a 90s baby.
Yeah.
And he basically finally he heard me playing the Beatles a lot. Of course, I educated my kids a lot on music. I played a lot of things for them. But when he got older and he said, Dad, I'm going to start collecting some of the Beatles stuff. I know we listened to it. What album should I start with? And it's so, I guess me and you just knowing one another, I guess the vibe with the Beatles, I said, Rubber Soul, you got to have Rubber. And I gave him a copy of Rubber Soul.
Yeah.
I said, start with this and then go from there. And that's an all-time favorite. That's just such a great album.
It's a great
Such
one.
a great album.
Yeah. This is Records in Recovery. We're hanging out with Windle Jay. Now, I know that as, of course, not just a music lover, but as a DJ, was it your love of music that got you into radio?
I think so, yes, because my mother, we listened to music all the time in our household growing up.
Mm-hmm. Same.
And I can remember, doing my homework at night and hearing Mitch Miller and laying on the floor, writing out a book report or doing math problems. And my father would be listening to, Willie Nelson, and things like that. And when I was with my mother, the radio was always on a radio station in Montgomery, Alabama, where I grew up, WHHY. WHHY AM at that time, which no longer exists, by the way. I don't know if you heard about this, but Cumulus actually pulled the plug on it and it went dark. They took it off the air. It had been a news station. It really has. But we would listen to WHHY, and I was exposed to a lot of top 40 and pop music of the day by her, and then my father was giving me just everything else that you could imagine from the 40s and 50s. No real rock and roll from the 50s, but, more of the MOR type stuff. That's a phrase that we back. And I heard all these people on the radio. And then the thing that did it for me, Larry Stevens in Montgomery, who was the morning DJ, I heard every morning on the way to school. Mm-hmm. And suddenly one night on the radio was this wacko maniac, and he was calling himself the Birdman. And I had to get a glimpse of him. And so being the music fan I was, radio was always on at the house or wherever I was. I went to try to get a glimpse of him at the radio station, and actually got into the reception desk. And I don't remember exactly what I told the lady. I had no reason to be there. And she said, "Can I help you? Is there anything you need?" And I said, I just wanted to see the guy on the air. And I looked down a row of windows and saw him on the air. And hearing the music he was playing on the speakers, and then after leaving there and seeing that and imagining knowing a little more about what was going on to get that music to me, and listening more and more, I think that was the catalyst, that visit to the radio station. And music suddenly became really more important to me at that time. Yeah. Because I remember I started chart watching, because I got some paraphernalia from the radio station that had their charts on it. And I suddenly just really dove into music and started experimenting and listening to other things I hadn't heard. And music and someone that was talking about the music and giving a little trivia on the music and having a real good time doing it. Oh, yeah. And it made such an impression on me. My mother, of course, had already got me involved with the Beatles and Elvis Presley. She was a big Elvis fan, but discovering Bird and listening to the radio, something just clicked. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted music to be a part of my life in some way. I played in some bands, did all kinds of different things, but I think the love of music really drew me into playing it and doing it all the time. It became kind of a lifestyle for me. I couldn't imagine doing anything else, and I've not done anything else but that, and collected music from that time forward. I think I'm looking over here on the wall in my studio. I believe the last time I counted it was about 6 months ago. And I know I've added some stuff now, but I think I'm a little over 8,000 albums,
Wow.
which I know people that have more. I know people that have more than that, but
Right.
I'm thinking I'm right at the 8,000 mark on albums now.
Yeah, I think I'm just like an inch away from a full 700, so I got a long ways to go to catch up to your collection. We're talking to Windle Jay as we're continuing this episode of Records and Recovery. I know that there's a phrase that always has stuck out to me, and I don't remember where I've heard it, but you might have heard it, of it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not be okay and not tell someone. What was the music for you at a time that you didn't feel like you had anybody to tell your something to?
Oh man. Good question.
Because I think we've all had that cradle moment, right, where we're listening to a certain song or an album and we just break, right? And I know as guys, that's kind of not the sexy visual, but it happens.
Well, it does happen, and I've actually been there, and I think that album for me is probably, believe it or not, I know this may sound really strange, but I think it's Willie Nelson's Stardust.
All right.
It's love songs and that sort of thing, but I think the reason that album meant so really got me because I was in despair at the time, very deeply in despair. Some things had not gone right, and some friendships had gone awry, and there were some family issues, not with my immediate family, but with the family itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember listening to that record with my father, and I knew how upset my father was about everything going on, and it had me really troubled. I was really worried about him. And I put that album on and started to just really, to be honest with you, I know it's not macho to say this, but started really tearing up, and just a lot of emotion started flowing out of me listening to that album, because it was something I had heard that he played a lot, and knowing his hurt and the hurt I was having and that the family was having at the time, it became an album that occasionally, I don't go to it as much as I do Abbey Road, but when I'm in a real, I guess that's the twofer that I have. It's a strange twofer, but I'll listen to that one. But if and thank goodness I have not been that way, but a couple of times in my life.
Yeah.
But I think when I have been at probably deep despair, I think that's the album that has soothed me.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I can describe it. It's just an album that soothes me, and that I feel the arms of my father and the arms of my mother when I listen to it. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It was such a part of my life when it came out. My father got it almost immediately when it came out, and it was one of those things. I remember when my father died, the first thing I did was I pulled that album out and listened to it. And I still get choked up a little bit about that,
Sure.
but I think I pulled that album out and listened to it about 3 or 4 times one evening, just sitting in the dark, with the stereo on, and the only time I moved was just to reach up and kind of flip it over.
Yeah.
And I think I flipped it over and over again and listened to it, and it really kind of helped me.
Yeah.
It really did.
Well,
It made me feel better.
Yeah, and it's amazing, too, how comforting a song can be, because you know how much your parents or the person you're missing is in love with it. As we talk about Birdman, Horse with No Name by America, he used to avidly put that on the jukebox when we go to Fuddruckers and get burgers. And and it's not even necessarily the greatest song ever, but for some reason he had a fixation about it. So I can't ever not hear it and not think about him and miss him, but also feel him with me,
Every year when and see, that's how music affects you. That's one of the things I love about music, the way certain songs will just kind of cling to you.
Yeah.
My Birdman song is not that one. My Birdman song is Reeling in the Years by Steely Dan.
All right.
Because the last time that before he passed away, he called me. He would call. Well, he did this several times, but this was the last conversation I had with him prior to when he went into the hospital. He had cancer, and called me on the phone the last time, a PD interaction, and he said, "Hey, I'm going out for just a few minutes. I want to hear Reeling in the Year, Steely Dan, and don't talk on the intro." And I've said, "No problem."
Sir, right.
And ever since then, every single time I hear that song, or if I work for a radio station and that song comes up in a talk break, I never talk on the intro to that song.
Yeah.
That's one thing I never do. I don't ever walk that one up. And every year, when it's the anniversary of, when he passed away,
Yeah.
I always play that album and play that album and listen to that whole album. And it's kind of like, "Hey, Bird, here's one for you."
Yeah.
It's just, that's the way music, gets into your heart. Some songs work their way in because of circumstances like that.
Sure. Yeah. You're listening to Records in Recovery, hanging out with Windle Jay as we're reminiscing about old friends and family, but obviously our love of music. Another one of my favorite Birdman stories, the first radio name I ever got was because I was DJing with him at the state fair, and he was getting ready to play. This was back when he'd have to queue up cassettes when we were on location. And he had little like 3x5 or 8x whatever cards, and all the songs were in order. And he was getting ready to play this Jackson 5 medley, and he goes, "It's put together so slick they call me Blades." And I'm like, "That's my name. That's my radio name. I want that." And so he gave me Billy Blades as my first radio name many moons ago. And it's still when I hear Jackson 5, like, that's another one of those triggers, right? You hear and you're like, man, like, I'm back at the state fair playing those songs. And he used to try to like pimp me out to like the ladies in the crowd. He's like, "All right, ladies, if you want to dance, come up with Billy Blades." And I was like, and I'm like 20 something, 19 something. And I'm like, I'm going to end up going home with one of these women, and I'm going to have no choice because he's going to make me.
There's and that's the thing with disc jockeys. When I listen to the radio now, or listen to a streaming service or something, or I see a song in a movie, from my past and the years that I've been in, I got into radio, actually got my first on-air job in the 70s. And a song will come on, and the first thing that I will think most of the time, and I don't know why this happens, it just pops into me. I think about the place I was, where I was when that song came out, the people that I worked with, and it's just a flood of memory, and it's just a melody.
Yeah.
But that melody will just flood me with memories of old friends, fun things, scary days, everything. And it Paul McCartney absolutely blew me out of the water. He recorded a song, and it's the songs we were singing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a song about his life with the Beatles. And the lyrics of the song are, "For a while, we could sit, smoke a pipe, talk about things."
Yep.
But the chorus of the song, it always went back to the songs we were singing at any particular time.
Yeah.
And music has a way of enveloping you and becoming almost like a soundtrack to your life.
Yeah.
And working in radio for so many years, that's what happens to me a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
It's been such a part of my life that, every single song I can go, "Oh yeah, yeah. 95 Rock. Yeah. JR. Yeah. And Mean Mr. Mustard, who was one of our guys that was a Beatles fan, had his on-air name was Mean Mr. Mustard."
Nice.
And talk about, and it just the memories flood back, so I can see their faces just from hearing a song.
Sure.
Music is just the most wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that particular Paul McCartney song, because that's from Flaming Pie, which is my favorite solo album of his. But for different reasons, because Calico Skies off of that album was the song I used to sing to my daughter Lennon when she was a baby. And still to this day, I cannot get through it without not, just losing every tear in my face, because I remember, the day she was born and singing that song and holding her for the first time and all that. And And it is like, and then that even ties in. I was going to ask you too, like, obviously your parents connecting you to music, which you now have all these memories. What about you and your kids? Like, your son's getting into vinyl, what, how has that really enhanced your relationship with them?
My youngest son is very into vinyl, and he accompanies me to different shows and sales. I think we ran into you, one time up in Birmingham at one of the record shows, and he comes down. He lives in Birmingham, and he will come down. He'll call me up and say, "Hey, Pops, I'm going to come down and I'm going to come down Friday night and spend the night and go back Saturday. Thought we might listen to some vinyl." And he will come and bring, one of his record store day bags, and he'll have 4 or 5 albums in it. And we'll sit up and talk. He'll get into town, and we'll eat dinner. And about 7:30, 8 o'clock, we'll start tracking vinyl. And I'll pull some things that I want to expose him to that he might not have heard. Mm-hmm. And he will bring things, and we will sit there and discuss music and listen to things that each of us like, turning the other onto it. And we do that fairly regularly. Actually, we're going to be doing that coming up in about a week from this Friday. He is coming, and we're going to sit and listen to music. We do that. That's a ritual that we have, that we do. My oldest son, it's a little different. He is very into music. He's not really a record collector, but he will sometimes. I got a text from him about a week ago, and he said, "Dad, turn me on to something that I haven't heard that you like."
Wow.
And I said, "Okay." And so I said, and he'll do that occasionally. And then occasionally I will get a text from him saying, "Dad, you got to listen to this." And it'll be a link to like an album streaming somewhere,
Yeah.
And the last one I sent him, I said, I bet he hadn't heard this. I sent him Crime of the Century by Supertramp.
All right. Good choice.
And just for fun, because I didn't know if he had ever heard it, and he just absolutely fell in love with it, and sent a video in his car about 4 days after it, and I flip it on and Supertramp's playing, and he kind of turns the camera around real quick. He said, "I'm at a red light. I haven't stopped playing this since you sent it to me," and that thrills me when that kind of thing happens.
That's awesome.
My daughter was the oldest, and so she listened to a lot of music with me when she was at home. She typically just sends me music and says, "Hey, you got to hear this. You got to hear that. I just started listening to this." And it's usually kind of with her. She's always trying to get me to leave the oldies along and come into the new day and listen to a lot of the new stuff. And I do. And I like some of it. Some of it, it's just not my thing.
Sure.
But my kids are very, very into music. They all listen to something. My daughter, my son, they're digital, so they have streaming services. They download albums, that sort of thing. But my youngest is the analog kid. He likes the big black vinyl and loves to collect and has a nice collection started.
That's awesome. This is Records in Recovery, hanging out with Windle Jay as we're talking music and healing and all kinds of great reminiscent stories. Windle, I wanted to ask you, I know that part of being a musician, also you hear songs differently. Do you ever go back and rediscover something and you pay more attention to the bass line or maybe the horn section or what's something you've rediscovered lately?
This one is, if you've never heard of this, I'd love for you to hear this too. There is an album, of course, it's another Beatles tie-in, but it's not the Beatles other than the writing. Booker T and the MGs did an album, the Macklemore Street album. Mm-hmm. And the cover of the album shows Booker T and the MGs walking across the street, Macklemore Avenue, right in front of Stax Records. But the album, what happened, Booker T had been out in Los Angeles, and Abbey Road came out. And he heard the album, and it so impressed him that he cut his tour short, went back to Memphis, Tennessee, went into the studio, and did an album of Abbey Road. I mean, it's mixed differently than the Abbey Road album, but it's Abbey Road by Booker T and the MGs, their impression, his take on the album.
Yeah.
And he arranged a lot of songs from the album. There's some stuff that's not on there from the album, but or it's not the complete album, but it's almost every song on the album redone in Booker T style.
Yeah.
The bass lines, and that's another thing that I love about music is when artists come out with something great and another artist finds it and has a completely different take on it.
Yeah.
And Booker T, the soul versions, if you will, of those great songs by the Beatles are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And the arrangements, the bass lines, the rhythms, I have listened to that one and have done some of those arrangements, or we've tried to kind of do those arrangements of those songs in some of the bands that I was in, and just had an incredible time doing it. Because I'm a horn player.
Yeah.
I was a sax player. I played tenor and alto, and I love R&B, and those are the types of bands that I have been in. And bands, they do some rock and roll and some pop stuff, but I love that kind of thing, and to take other songs and just try to work them up in a different style.
Yeah.
I think that is fascinating, to me. But that album really impressed me on the possibilities of music.
Yeah.
And really made me start thinking about, arrangements and, where you take something and make something not better out of it, but something different that's interesting that makes somebody go, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Well, and I know that we have Marvel to thank for making these awesome montages of fight scenes with classic hits of our generation, and it kind of reintroduces the next gen to that band or that song. Has there ever been a movie you've seen where you're like, oh, that's the perfect song for that?
The Departed comes to mind.
Okay.
Some of the songs in it, and Bringing Out the Dead, which is another Martin Scorsese movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people know about it. I don't think it did really well at the box office, but the soundtrack to that movie is so incredible. It's hard to explain, but there's some great songs in it that are great classic hits, but stuff that's not everyday, like Bellboy.
Mm-hmm.
From Quadrophenia is used. They're these ambulance drivers, and they're going in and out of these places trying to save people, and they're kind of like the bellboy. They're carrying people in, carrying people out, taking care of the luggage that may be wounded at the time. And it's just the way the music is weaved into that it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And it fits, and that's the great thing, is when you see a film and the music mirrors in its own way what is happening.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen. I don't see that happening as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
But I think those two films, the music is just spot on in it. Every single song fits the vibe of the story that's going on, and that's awesome when that happens.
Yeah, Scorsese is awesome at that, because one of the things I would say too is the using Layla in Goodfellas, like that definitely just captures, and you can't hear the piano part anymore. If you've seen the movie, you can't not marry the two in your mind. But also, anytime that Quentin Tarantino gets a hold of something that was, he's told the movie in his mind through the music before he ever writes the script, and so I love that.
Dogs.
Yes.
Reservoir Dogs is the perfect example of that in his movies. I mean, the soundtrack to that movie just absolutely blew me away. When I saw the movie, I was as excited about the music I was hearing in the movie as I was the storyline going on. That's a captivating thing. And see that, and only music can make you feel that way. Why do you think they've scored movies since the beginning of time of the motion picture audience? They've scored it because music even when there were silent films, some of the comedies are a little more rickety with ragtime and that sort of thing. But then you got others, you go back to The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson. Yeah. He's singing in it, and he's got some, obvious audio in it, but the other parts of the movie, the music just sets the mood. And I think that's something they learned early on, that music was a part of that. That anytime you had visual, that that soundtrack is going to be just as important as what's going on the screen.
Thanks, man. Well, that wraps up Records and Recovery for this week. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss future episodes, and we'll see you next time.
Records and Recovery is a Spacebird Media production and a part of the Thesis Radio Network. Find more episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts or at thesis.com.